Major General Serena Dixon rolled into Brookfield just before sunrise, the engine's hum swallowed by towering pines lining the two-lane highway. Dressed down in a navy hoodie and faded jeans, she slid from her vehicle with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to walking through chaos unarmed. No polished uniform, no escort, no fanfare, just a single woman on a mission born of a promise. She crossed the gravel lot to the lone gas pump, the cold morning air brushing against her skin like a silent warning. Inside the dimly lit station, she offered a soft, "Good morning," her voice steady as she picked up a bottle of water and set exact change on the counter. Every movement was deliberate, economical, as though she navigated far more dangerous terrain than this rural outpost. Unbeknownst to her, that simple exchange would ignite a storm. Behind the register stood Kathy, a 50-something clerk whose world had never included someone like Serena Black, unadorned, unannounced. The moment Serena's calm gaze met hers, Kathy's chest tightened with a reflexive suspicion she could not explain. Her heart pounded as if the air between them crackled with unspoken danger. Instinct drove her fingers to the phone. "I need to report something suspicious," she whispered into the receiver, voice quivering. "There's a woman just standing there, staring." Kathy watched wide-eyed as Serena returned to her car, placed both hands on the wheel, and took a measured sip of water. Serena checked her map as though the universe itself might shift at any moment, and in Brookfield, it would. In that heartbeat between reflex and reason, Kathy set forces in motion that neither of them could yet fathom. Major General Dixon's calm was shattered by the wail of a distant siren. Across town, dispatcher Hayes barked into the handset, "Unit 12, we've got a suspicious person at the Shell Station, black female, unknown identity." Instantaneously, Patrol Car 12 roared to life. The engine trembled under Officer Randall's firm grip on the wheel as his finger tapped the siren switch, unleashing a steady, urgent hum. Beside him, Officer Pierce's knuckles whitened around the steering column, eyes narrowing on the GPS coordinates blinking on the dash. Horizon Fuels, Brookfield. Moments earlier, a weathered pickup had idled at the lot's edge. The driver glanced at Serena Dixon through the windshield, curiosity flickering in his tired eyes, before he shifted gears and drove off. A small boy at the pump tugged his mother's sleeve, whispering, "Who is she?" The woman simply shook her head, busy counting coins, unwilling to invite trouble. None of them knew the gravity hidden behind Serena's ordinary clothes. Now Randall and Pierce barreled down the narrow road, the stillness of dawn giving way to mechanical urgency. The hush that once clung to the pines was replaced by the rhythm of tires on asphalt, and Pierce's muttered question, "What's our play?" "When we get there," Randall flicked on the spotlight, its beam cutting through shadows. "We ask questions, get ID," he replied coldly, voice-clipped conviction etched in every line of his face. There was no room for doubt. Orders were orders. Inside her SUV, Serena lifted one hand from the wheel, poised to unclasp the water bottle cap. 30 years commanding elite units, navigating deserts and diplomatic chambers, she'd never felt more invisible. Here in Brookfield, she was just another stranger beneath the pump's flickering light. The wind sighed through the pines, a low warning that a storm, unseen, unavoidable, was bearing down on a moment that would redefine what justice meant. Patrol Car 12 skidded into the gravel lot, tires screaming as the engine cut off. Randall's door slammed open before the car even settled. His hand hovered over his baton, holster, eyes darting as though expecting an ambush. Pierce tumbled out beside him, stance wide, his gaze hard on the lone SUV at the pump. No greeting, no request for identification, only the raw intent of two men convinced they had every right to assert control. Through her rear-view mirror, Serena Dixon watched them approach, her breath steady, despite the adrenaline that prickled her skin. She lowered her window with deliberate calm. "Good morning, officers," she said, voice soft but unwavering. "Major General Serena Dixon. How may I help you?" Randall's reply was a bark. "Get out of the vehicle." Now his tone carried the finality of steel. Serena's hands rose, one brushing the lapel of her hoodie as though to draw attention to credentials she would never refuse to show. "I'm here on official business," she said, lifting her chest. "You're welcome to verify my ID." Instead of compliance, Randall grabbed the doorframe. With a practiced yank, he wrenched Serena out of the seat. Her knee hit the concrete slab with a hollow thud that echoed across the station. The concrete bit into her jeans, but she didn't wince. Around them, a handful of early customers froze. Some gas pumps clicked, cash registers paused, and a stray dog scampered to the edge of the lot barking nervously. Pierce crouched to cuff her wrists, his jaw set as though daring her to struggle. The steel clicked shut, the sound sharper than any gunshot. Serena inhaled slowly, her posture almost regal in its restraint. Her eyes met Randall's for the briefest moment, a flash of something deeper than defiance, something that spoke of decades spent commanding respect in far more dangerous places. As Pierce hauled her upright, Serena's silence became a statement. In that charged stillness, authority shifted imperceptibly. The two officers crouched over her, uncertain now whether the stranger in jeans was just another suspect or the storm they had no power to control. A handful of customers froze in place as Randall and Pierce pressed Serena's bent form against the gleaming hood of her SUV. Some glanced away, unwilling to witness a high-ranking officer reduced to a suspect's posture. Others watched, hearts pounding. A teenage boy, hands shaking, lifted his phone and began recording, his breath hitching as he realized the fallen figure wasn't a criminal, but a decorated general. Randall's gloved hand slammed onto Serena's shoulder, then yanked her wrist behind her back. The cold steel cuffs bit into her skin as Pierce forced her head down the hood's metal edge, digging into her cheek. Serena's voice was barely audible. "I am not resisting," she murmured, each word steady against the echo of rubber soles on concrete. But the two officers stayed deaf to explanation. In their rigid silence, they wielded authority like a weapon, leaving no space for nuance or recognition. Around them, the air grew thick tension, hanging heavy like the scent of gasoline. Serena felt every eye on her, from the curious clerk peering through the glass to the stranger in the pickup, idling just beyond the pump. In that suspended moment, Serena understood precisely how much space a black woman was allowed to occupy in the world. Step beyond it, and you are met with force. Step below it, and you fade into indifference. She could have lashed out, invoked her rank, or demanded respect. Instead, she chose restraint, knowing that her silence, her refusal to struggle, would amplify this injustice far beyond Brookfield's borders. Each shallow breath she took became a testament, transforming a solitary act of humiliation into undeniable proof of a storm gathering on the horizon. The next morning, Major General Serena Dixon was escorted into Courtroom B, in plain clothes, her wrists still bound by gleaming steel cuffs. The room was hushed, every footstep and breath seemed magnified beneath the high-arched ceiling. She paused at the threshold, lifted her chin, and stepped forward with the quiet assurance of someone who had faced far deadlier battlefields. At the bench sat Judge Raymond Bishop. His dark hair was slicked back and his wire-rimmed glasses gleamed under the courtroom lights. He folded his hands atop the scarred wood of the desk, eyes narrowing as if viewing her through a forensic microscope. Bishop had built a reputation defending a white officer accused of grievous violence against a black teenager, celebrating it as a triumph of procedure over passion. Now, assuming the impartial mantle of the bench, he showed no inclination toward empathy, only the rigid formality of the law. Behind Serena, the clerk arranged reams of paperwork in neat stacks, each folder a silent promise of procedural precision. To her side, her court-appointed attorney shuffled through his notes, casting nervous glances at her unmoving figure. He seemed to interpret her steadfast silence as defiance rather than dignity. The gallery was nearly empty, save for a handful of locals who watched with curious restraint, unwilling or unprepared to intervene. The air smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, underscoring the contrast between procedural calm and the storm that had already been unleashed by the video recording circulating online. Serena remained still as the bailiff instructed her to approach the podium. Her posture was taut but unbowed, a four-star general conditioned by decades of command to stand firm, even when the world pressed down on her shoulders. In that moment, the courtroom's aura of rigid control felt brittle, as though it could shatter at the first crack of truth. Behind her measured composure lay the gathering force of justice, rising beyond statutes and precedents, an unspoken promise that this case was only the beginning of a reckoning. The first hearing began under the harsh glare of courtroom lights. Prosecutor Emily Ward rose, her posture, rigid voice crisp as she recited the charges: failure to comply with lawful orders and disorderly conduct. She spoke with the gravity of someone convinced that procedure alone could convict. Behind her, the police report lay like a talisman, every entry, every timestamp, every notation repeated verbatim by Judge Bishop as if its words were gospel. Serena's court-appointed attorney shifted uneasily in his chair. He cleared his throat, glanced at her record of service Silver Star Purple Heart, decades commanding elite units, and then looked away, unwilling to draw attention to the truth burning in those pages. His strategy seemed to hinge on obscuring her rank rather than defending it. He whispered to the judge, "Your Honor, perhaps we can address procedural inconsistencies." But his words trailed off into the heavy hush. Serena offered no rebuttal. She tilted her head once in acknowledgement, the faintest nod that spoke volumes. All around her, the room felt thick with tension, like smoke curling up from a dying ember, lingering even after the flame is gone. The bailiff's polished shoes tapped a slow rhythm on the hardwood floor. A fountain pen clicked as a clerk jotted notes. The hush was so deep it felt almost tangible, nearly physical. Each second dragged like a weighty coil, constricting the air, until invisible force pressed down on every listener. Serena's silence was not capitulation. It was a living crucible forging accountability. In that pregnant pause, the courtroom's cold formality began to crack. The relentless quiet, tinged with the scent of old coffee and polished oak, pressed on Bishop Ward, and the attendees forcing them to confront the dissonance between their rituals and the injustice unfolding. Her refusal to speak became a mirror reflecting every unspoken bias and procedural blind spot. In the echo of her stillness, power shifted imperceptibly. The silence itself demanded recognition of a truth that no amount of paperwork could obscure. Far from the quiet streets of Brookfield, somewhere inside a steel-lined barracks, Private First Class Jackson scrolled through his phone in the dim glow of the pre-dawn hours. He nearly dropped the device when the video came into focus, a woman in plain clothes bound in handcuffs, her head pressed to a gas-stained hood by two uniformed officers. Jackson's breath caught. The woman spoke with a calm authority he recognized instantly. Major General Serena Dixon, who had addressed his battalion just months before, her dress blues shining under the parade ground's midday sun. He tapped the screen again, disbelief pounding in his chest, then forwarded the clip to his squad leader with a simple caption, "Sir, please advise." Within minutes, the message vaulted through encrypted channels, each recipient struck by the same shock. The battalion commander paused over the file, then sent it up to brigade headquarters. Before dawn broke over multiple time zones, the video had reached the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Screens glowed in offices where decorum reigned. Still, every officer who saw that recording felt the gravity shift in their gut. By mid-morning, a terse memo circulated through the Pentagon's quarters. No alarms, no blaring sirens, just a directive typed in precise language. Situation awareness. Major General Dixon incident. Intelligence and legal divisions monitor developments. Stand by for further orders. It landed on desks with the weight of an unspoken promise that honor demanded swift yet measured response. The military apparatus kicked into gear with near-silent efficiency. Staff officers drafted talking points. Legal advisors reviewed jurisdictional nuances. Uniformed aides prepared briefing packets. Throughout, the undercurrent was unmistakable. This was more than a local arrest. It was a challenge to the very integrity of a four-star general service, a breach no officer could ignore. For Serena's subordinates, watching that video unspool wasn't merely about outrage. It was a call to defend the ideals she embodied. In every hushed consultation and clipped email, the Department of Defense reaffirmed that the dignity of its leaders would not be negotiated, tempered, or forgotten. The gears of military justice turned deliberately but inexorably, an unspoken vow that when the world witnessed an injustice, its guardians would answer with unwavering resolve. A low rumble rolled through Brookfield, just as evening shadows lengthened across the courthouse lawn. Through the quiet streets, a convoy of matte black military vehicles glided forward in single file. No sirens, no flashing lights, only the deep, resonant thrum of diesel engines and the promise of overwhelming force. Each vehicle carried no identifying markings, just tinted windows, behind which sat disciplined officers in full-dress blues. At the head of the line, Colonel Derek Stanton sat with crisp posture, jaw-set eyes surveying the courthouse edifice, as though committing every seam and stone to memory. His presence alone spoke volumes. This was neither parade nor pageantry, but a deliberate assertion that the dignity of one of their own was not negotiable. Inside, a handful of court staff peered from behind the jury room window. The courthouse bailiff pressed his forehead against the glass, counting the vehicles one by one, beads of sweat forming at his temples. He swallowed hard, realizing he had never seen such a display on this quiet strip of asphalt. Stanton's lead vehicle rolled to a smooth stop before the front steps. He stepped out, boots silent, on the marbled threshold and paused. His eyes flicked from the entrance to the towering columns, then to the small gathering of onlookers, reporters, with phones held aloft, curious locals leaning out of second-floor windows. He offered no greeting, uttered no speech. His silence conveyed more power than any shouted command. This was not an occupation. It was a testament, a reminder that the handcuffs affixed to Major General Dixon the day before had been placed on the wrong person, at the wrong time in the wrong place. By their presence, the military signaled that institutional honor demanded redress. As Stanton crossed the final step, the sun dipped behind the courthouse dome, casting him in silhouette. The convoy's engines idled a low chorus beneath a sky turning from gold to violet. In that charged stillness, the stakes of the coming hearing crystallized. Justice was no longer a matter for local protocol alone, but for the conscience of a nation's most disciplined guardians. The courtroom's hush shattered with the staccato ring of a secure government line. Judge Raymond Bishop's hand trembled as he lifted the receiver. From the other end, a measured voice, calm yet unyielding, issued orders. You will vacate all charges against Major General Serena Dixon immediately. You will return to that bench and issue a public apology verbatim without amendment. Do you understand? Bishop's throat tightened. He, the once proud defender of procedural rigor, now sat pale and unsteady, hearing his authority eclipsed by the Secretary of Defense. His breath came in short gasps as he replaced the handset, the click echoing through the silent room like a verdict. Papers rustled as reporters and clerks exchanged shocked glances. Even the courtroom's oak panel walls seemed to lean in. Summoning every ounce of reserve, Bishop tapped his gavel twice before rising. His voice, once resonant with judicial confidence, cracked as he read the dismissal. In light of new information, this court hereby dismisses all charges against Major General Serena Dixon, acknowledges a grave error in its treatment of her, and extends a formal apology for the distress caused under its jurisdiction. Below the bench, Colonel Derek Stanton nodded almost imperceptibly. He stepped forward, each movement deliberate, and with quiet precision unclasped the handcuffs from Serena's wrists. The metal links fell to the floor, click, and the sound reverberated like a release of pent-up tension. Serena Rose's shoulders squared, her gaze sweeping the assembled. In that instant, she filled the room, a silhouette of strength, silhouette of a century's worth of service etched into every line of her posture. The apology's words hung in the air, mingling with the soft scrape of chairs and the collective exhale of those present. For a heartbeat, no one dared speak, then the clerk cleared her throat. The bailiff shifted and life returned to the courtroom in slow motion. But everything had changed. The handcuffs were gone, the charges erased, and Serena Dixon stood tall. Unyielding, vindicated, her silent dignity, now a herald of justice reclaimed. At last, the steel cuffs fell from Serena's wrists and her world expanded. Seated before the bench, she spoke quietly without anger of the power of silence and the wounds of being unseen. Her voice, steady yet infused with quiet fire, carried stories of countless individuals who lacked uniforms or handheld cameras whose suffering unfolded in shadows. She reminded the courtroom that true justice is not subdued by metal fetters, but awakened by the voice of conscience. Her closing words lingered like a benediction. Justice does not bow to handcuffs. It is summoned by the courage to stand. Silence filled the chamber once more, but it was no longer oppressive. It swelled into a symphony of awakening, as if every heart in that room, from the clerk's desk to the highest bench, recognized that justice waits not for permission, but for the unwavering resolve of those brave enough to speak truth through their silence. From this story, we learn that true power does not always lie in shouting or violent actions, but sometimes in steadfast silence and unassailable dignity. Choosing to endure the blows of authority without protest reveals a simple yet profound truth. When systems run on prejudice, silent perseverance will expose every hidden injustice. If you were in the shoes of someone who just endured public humiliation, your next step might not be to lash out or confront head-on, but to leverage the story circulating everywhere to awaken the community's conscience and encourage others not to stay silent in the face of bias. You could organize a public forum, write an expose, or partner with human rights groups to protect the rights of other marginalized communities. That power comes from transforming personal pain into a flame that lights the path for countless unnamed people who have suffered in the shadows. As for whether racism will be completely eradicated by 2050, there may never be a definitive answer. History shows that prejudice endures even when laws are reformed and only when each individual continuously engages in reflection, resistance, and education of the next generation can we hope for its final demise. Though 2050 may seem distant, every small action we take today helps build a future with no place for hatred, and it is the resolve of those who dare to remain silent that may become the guiding banner toward a more just world.